The morning shift at Manhattan's Grand Plaza Hotel always started the same way for Daniel Cooper. At 5:30 a.m., while the city still slept under its blanket of winter darkness, he would slip through the service entrance, change into his maintenance uniform, and begin his rounds through the marble halls where people paid more for one night than he earned in a month. Daniel was 32 years old, but the worry lines around his eyes made him look older. His hands were rough from years of fixing leaky faucets, replacing light bulbs and patching walls. Yet there was something gentle about him, something that hadn't been hardened by the struggles of raising his 7-year-old daughter Emma alone. Emma was his entire world. After her mother left when she was just 2 years old, Daniel had learned to braid hair from YouTube videos, to pack balanced lunches, and to survive on 4 hours of sleep so he could work double shifts. The medical bills from Emma's asthma treatments had drained his savings, but he never let her see him worried. Every night, he would tuck her in at his mother's apartment in Queens, kiss her forehead, and promise that better days were coming. That Thursday morning, Daniel was fixing a chandelier in the hotel's grand ballroom when he heard voices echoing through the space. He looked down from his ladder to see a group of elegantly dressed people arranging chairs and setting up a small stage. A woman in her 50s, wearing a tailored Chanel suit, was directing the setup with precise hand gestures. This was Victoria Ashford, widow of real estate mogul Richard Ashford, and one of the hotel's most demanding regular guests. She was organizing a charity gala for the New York Opera Society. Beside her stood her daughter, Catherine Ashford, 28 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a sophisticated bun. Catherine had just returned from studying music in Vienna and was known in social circles for her sharp wit and her impossibly high standards. She had turned down 3 marriage proposals in the past 2 years, claiming that none of the eligible bachelors in Manhattan could match her intellectually or artistically. Daniel tried to work quietly, hoping to finish before they noticed him. But the chandelier's broken chain slipped from his grip, and the metallic clatter echoed through the ballroom. Catherine looked up, her green eyes settling on the maintenance man above. "Daniel, are you almost done? We need this space in 20 minutes, Victoria called out, checking her diamond watch. "Yes, ma'am. Just a few more minutes," Daniel replied, his voice steady despite his embarrassment. Catherine walked closer, observing him with curiosity. She noticed his careful hands, the concentration in his expression, the way he handled the delicate crystal with unexpected gentleness. Her assistant, a young woman named Rebecca, rushed in carrying a stack of programs. "Miss Ashford, we have a problem. The tenor we hired for tonight's performance just canceled. Food poisoning. We need someone who can sing the Mozart piece for the opening." Catherine sighed. "This gala is in 6 hours. Where are we supposed to find a trained opera singer on such short notice?" "Maybe we should cancel the performance," Victoria suggested. "No, this gala is about proving that opera isn't dying. We need that opening number," Catherine insisted, her frustration evident. Daniel continued working above them, but his heart rate had increased. He knew the Mozart piece they were discussing. He had studied classical music in college before dropping out when Emma was born. Music had been his first love, his escape, his dream, until reality demanded he choose survival over passion. "What about him?" Rebecca suddenly said, pointing up at Daniel. Catherine looked up, confused. "The maintenance man? You cannot be serious." "I am desperate enough to consider anything at this point," Rebecca said with a shrug. Catherine crossed her arms and looked up at Daniel with a mixture of amusement and skepticism. She made a decision that seemed to her like a harmless joke, a funny story she could tell at dinner parties. "Fine, sir. Can you come down for a moment?" she called out. Daniel descended the ladder slowly, wondering if he had done something wrong. He stood before the 2 women, his work uniform stained with dust, his hands still holding a screwdriver. Catherine smiled, a challenge in her eyes. "Do you know anything about opera? About Mozart?" "A little," Daniel admitted carefully. "Here is my offer, and I am only half joking. If you can sing the aria from Don Giovanni, the one we need for tonight, and if you can sing it well enough to not embarrass me in front of 300 guests, I will seriously consider marrying you." The ballroom went silent. Rebecca gasped. Victoria looked shocked. Catherine continued, her tone playful but with an edge of cruelty. I have been searching for a man with culture, with soul, with an understanding of true art. If a hotel maintenance man can deliver that, then perhaps I have been looking in the wrong places. So, what do you say? Sing this Mozart and I will marry you. Daniel felt his face flush. He knew he was being mocked, that this was entertainment for a bored heiress. The old Daniel, the one who had dreams, wanted to walk away. But he thought of Emma, of her medical bills, of the way her eyes lit up when he sang to her at bedtime. He looked directly at Catherine and said quietly, "Which aria exactly?" Catherine's eyebrows raised slightly. She hadn't expected him to accept. Most men in his position would have laughed nervously and retreated, understanding the joke for what it was, a rich woman's entertainment at the expense of someone beneath her social class. "De vieni alla finestra," the serenade. "Can you handle that?" Catherine asked, her tone still dripping with condescension. Daniel nodded slowly. He could feel his heart pounding against his ribs. It had been years since he had sung anything beyond lullabies for Emma. The classical training felt like a lifetime ago, buried under exhaustion and responsibility. "Well then, let us hear it." "Right now," Catherine said, gesturing toward the empty ballroom as if it were already filled with her wealthy audience. Victoria touched her daughter's arm. "Catherine, this is cruel. Let the man finish his work." "No, mother. I want to hear this. If he is brave enough to accept, then I am curious enough to listen," Catherine replied, crossing her arms. Daniel set down his tools. His mouth felt dry. He thought about walking away, about protecting what little dignity he had left. But something in Catherine's smug expression ignited a spark he thought had died years ago. She saw him as nothing, as a joke, as someone so far below her that his very existence was amusing. He closed his eyes for a moment, remembering his college professor's words. "Singing is not about perfection, Daniel. It is about truth. It is about letting people see your soul." When Daniel opened his mouth and began to sing, the ballroom transformed. His voice was a warm, rich baritone that seemed to rise from somewhere deep and ancient. The Italian words flowed with perfect pronunciation, with feeling that no amount of money could buy. He sang of longing, of desire, of a lover serenading beneath a window, and every note carried the weight of his own buried dreams. Catherine's smug smile faded. Her arms slowly uncrossed. She stood perfectly still, her eyes widening as the sound washed over her. Victoria's hand went to her chest. Rebecca's mouth fell open. Daniel did not perform for them. He sang for himself, for the young man he used to be, for Emma sleeping peacefully at his mother's apartment, for every dream he had sacrificed. His eyes remained closed, and tears gathered at the corners without falling. When the final note faded into silence, the ballroom felt different, as if something sacred had just occurred. Daniel opened his eyes and looked directly at Catherine. Her face had gone pale. For the first time in years, Catherine Ashford found herself completely without words. Victoria broke the silence first. Her voice was barely a whisper. "My God, who are you?" Daniel picked up his screwdriver, his hands trembling slightly. "Just the maintenance man, ma'am. I need to finish the chandelier before my shift ends." He turned and walked back toward his ladder, leaving 3 stunned women standing in the center of the ballroom. Catherine stood frozen, her heart racing in a way she had never experienced. The smugness had vanished completely, replaced by something that felt uncomfortably close to shame. She watched Daniel climb back up the ladder, his movements deliberate and calm, as if he had not just shattered every assumption she had made about him. "Wait," Catherine finally managed to say. Her voice sounded different, softer. "Please wait." Daniel paused but did not look down. "Yes, ma'am? Where did you learn to sing like that?" she asked, genuinely confused. "That was not amateur level. That was conservatory trained. I studied music at Juilliard," Daniel said quietly, still focused on the chandelier above. "For 2 years. Then life happened." Victoria stepped forward, her business mind already calculating. "Young man, what is your name?" "Daniel Cooper." "Mr. Cooper, I need to be direct with you. We need a singer for tonight's gala. The pay is $2,000 for a 15-minute performance. Are you interested? Victoria asked. Daniel's hands stopped moving. $2,000. That was nearly a month's salary. That was Emma's next 3 asthma treatments. That was the overdue rent payment that kept him awake at night. But he also knew what this world was. He had seen enough wealthy guests at the Grand Plaza to understand that generosity always came with strings attached, with humiliation disguised as opportunity. Why would you pay me that much? Daniel asked, his voice cautious. Because you are extraordinary, and we are desperate, Victoria said simply. And because my daughter just made a rather public promise that she now needs to address. Catherine flinched. Mother, I was joking. Were you? Because he fulfilled his part. He sang Mozart, and he sang it beautifully, Victoria replied, a hint of reproach in her tone. Daniel finally climbed down and faced them both. Listen, I appreciate the offer, but I know how this works. You will put me on stage tonight. Tell your rich friends the heartwarming story about the singing maintenance man, and I become your charity case, your entertainment. No thank you. The words hung in the air, sharp and honest. If you are still watching this and rooting for Daniel, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Because what happens next will change everything. Catherine felt something crack inside her chest. She saw herself clearly for the first time, reflected in this man's tired eyes. She had been cruel without even realizing it. She had treated another human being as a prop in her privileged life. You are right, Catherine said quietly. I was cruel. I mocked you. I am sorry. The apology surprised everyone, including Catherine herself. She was not someone who apologized easily. But this is not charity, Catherine continued. This is business. We need you, and you clearly need the money. Can we start over, please? Daniel studied her face, searching for sincerity. For the first time, he saw past the designer clothes and the heiress armor. He saw someone young, lonely, and just as lost as he was. Daniel took a deep breath. He thought of Emma's inhaler nearly empty. He thought of the eviction notice folded in his wallet. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. All right, I will do it. But I have conditions, Daniel said firmly. I work until 3 p.m. I need time to go home, see my daughter, and prepare properly. And I want the payment up front, half now, half after the performance. Victoria nodded immediately. Agreed. Rebecca, write Mr. Cooper a check for $1,000 right now. Catherine watched the exchange with growing respect. This man was not intimidated by her world. He negotiated like someone who understood his value, despite his worn uniform and calloused hands. There is one more thing, Catherine added. You will need proper attire. Come with me after your shift. I will take you to my tailor. I cannot afford that, Daniel said. It is on me. Consider it part of the agreement, Catherine replied. And perhaps we could rehearse together this afternoon? I play piano. I could accompany you. For the first time, Daniel smiled slightly. That would help. The next few hours passed in a blur. Daniel finished his maintenance duties while his mind raced through the music he had not performed in years. At 3 p.m., he met Catherine in the hotel lobby. She had changed into casual clothes, jeans and a cashmere sweater, and for a moment she looked less like an untouchable heiress and more like a regular person. They drove to a small tailor shop in Brooklyn where Catherine's family had been clients for decades. The elderly tailor, Mr. Chun, measured Daniel with expert precision, asking no questions about the mismatched pair before him. While waiting for the alterations, Catherine drove Daniel to his mother's apartment in Queens. She waited in the car, watching through the window as Daniel embraced a small girl with curly brown hair. Emma's face lit up when she saw her father, and Catherine felt an unexpected tightness in her throat. When Daniel returned to the car, his expression had softened. She has a performance at school next week. A winter concert. She is singing in the chorus, he said quietly. You must be proud, Catherine replied. I am terrified I will have to miss it because of work, Daniel admitted. But tonight's payment means I can request the evening off. They drove to Catherine's family estate in the Hamptons. In the vast music room with its grand piano and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, they rehearsed. Catherine's fingers moved across the keys with practiced elegance, and Daniel's voice filled the space with warmth and power. Between songs, they talked. Daniel spoke about Emma, about his dreams of returning to music, about the life he had built from nothing. Catherine spoke about the pressure of her family name, the loneliness of her privilege, the way every man she met wanted her money or her connections, never just her. As sunset painted the sky orange and gold, something shifted between them. The walls came down. The heiress and the maintenance man disappeared, leaving only two people who understood what it meant to sacrifice dreams for survival. The Grand Plaza ballroom that evening looked like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above 300 guests dressed in tuxedos and evening gowns. The city's elite had gathered for Victoria Ashford's Opera Charity Gala, expecting the usual predictable evening of champagne, small talk, and tax-deductible donations. Backstage, Daniel adjusted his bow tie for the 10th time. The tailored tuxedo fit him perfectly, transforming his appearance completely. But his hands trembled slightly, and his throat felt tight with nerves. Catherine found him pacing in the corridor. "Hey," she said softly, "you are going to be magnificent. What if I forget the words? What if my voice cracks?" Daniel asked, the vulnerability raw in his voice. "Then you will be human, and that is more valuable than perfection," Catherine replied. She reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm and steady. "I believe in you, Daniel Cooper." Something passed between them in that moment. Something neither could name but both felt deeply. Victoria's voice echoed through the ballroom as she introduced the opening performance. "We have a very special artist tonight. A man who reminds us that true talent exists everywhere, often in the most unexpected places. Please welcome Daniel Cooper." Daniel walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit him, and 300 pairs of eyes turned in his direction. He saw wealthy faces, skeptical expressions, people already forming judgments. He thought about running, about disappearing back into his safe, invisible life. Then he saw Catherine at the piano, her eyes meeting his with absolute confidence. She nodded once, a silent promise. "I am here with you." The opening notes filled the ballroom, and Daniel began to sing. His voice soared through the space, rich and powerful and achingly beautiful. He sang with everything he had, with years of suppressed dreams, with love for his daughter, with gratitude for this impossible moment. The Italian words spoke of longing and desire, but Daniel infused them with his own story, his own pain and hope. The ballroom fell completely silent. Champagne glasses stopped midair. Conversations died. Even the waitstaff stood still, mesmerized. Catherine played with tears streaming down her face. She had heard hundreds of trained singers, had attended operas in Vienna and Milan, but nothing had ever moved her like this. This was not technical perfection. This was a soul laid bare, honest and undefended. When the final note faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the ballroom erupted. 300 people rose to their feet, applauding with genuine emotion. Grown men wiped their eyes. Women clutched their pearls. Even the cynical society critics looked stunned. Daniel stood there, overwhelmed, barely able to process what had just happened. Catherine left the piano and walked to him, taking his hand in front of everyone. "You kept your promise," she said, her voice breaking. "You sang Mozart beautifully. Now I need to keep mine." "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, confused. Catherine smiled through her tears. "I said if you could sing this, I would seriously consider marrying you." "Well, I am beyond considering. I am asking. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, when you are ready, would you let me be part of your life?" 18 months later, the same Grand Plaza ballroom was decorated again, but this time for a wedding. White roses cascaded from every surface, and string quartets played softly as guests arrived. The ceremony was smaller than what Catherine's mother had originally planned, more intimate, with people who truly mattered. Daniel stood at the altar in another perfectly tailored tuxedo, but this time without trembling hands. Beside him was his best man, Mr. Chun the tailor, who had become an unlikely friend. In the front row sat Daniel's mother, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, and next to her was Emma, now 9 years old, wearing a pale pink dress and holding a basket of flower petals. Catherine walked down the aisle on her mother's arm. Her dress was elegant but simple, nothing like the extravagant gown Victoria had suggested. She wanted Daniel to see her, not a costume or a performance. When their eyes met, both smiled with the easy comfort of two people who had spent the past year and a half truly learning each other. It had not been a fairy tale. There had been difficult conversations about money, about family expectations, about the reality of blending two completely different worlds. Catherine had insisted Daniel return to school, funding his final years at Juilliard while he continued working part-time. Daniel had insisted on a prenuptial agreement, wanting their marriage built on love rather than financial dependence. They had argued, compromised, laughed, and grown together. The ceremony was beautiful and brief. When the officiant pronounced them married, Daniel sang a soft phrase from the Mozart aria that had started everything. Catherine laughed through happy tears. At the reception, Emma gave a speech that brought the entire room to tears. "My dad taught me that dreams do not die, they just wait for the right moment. And Mom Catherine, she gave my dad his moment back. Now we are a family." Victoria raised a toast. "To my daughter, who finally found a man worthy of her. Not because of his voice, though it is magnificent, but because of his character, his strength, and his enormous heart. Welcome to the family, Daniel." Years passed. Daniel performed regularly at the Metropolitan Opera while teaching music to underprivileged children in Queens. Catherine opened a foundation providing scholarships to talented students who could not afford music education. They had 2 more children, a boy and a girl, who grew up understanding that privilege came with responsibility. Emma graduated from high school with honors and pursued medicine, specializing in respiratory therapy, wanting to help kids like herself who struggled with asthma. On their 10th anniversary, Catherine and Daniel returned to the Grand Plaza Ballroom. The chandelier Daniel had been fixing that morning still hung in the same spot, now perfectly maintained. Thank you for watching this story until the end. If it touched your heart, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what kind of story you would like to hear next. Your support means everything. Remember, extraordinary moments often begin with ordinary kindness, and true love sees past the surface to the soul beneath. Until next time.